Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Medway. I'm the game designer for Blood on the Clocktower. This is the first of a series of interviews where we ask industry professionals about their area of expertise, and they tell us where we're wrong and what they. Um, Up first, we have Jamey Stegmaier, game designer and game publisher extraordinaire. I don't think there's anyone else in the world who deserves the title more. And Evin Donahue, fellow Blood on the Clocktower TPI games publisher. I'll more or less step back because as a game designer, I have less to contribute to this conversation. So take it away, boys.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in before throwing a first question at Jamey and kicking off a discussion that this chat will probably be more focused around the production side of things. And one thing that a lot of fans of Blood on the Clocktower may not know is that in the early stages of planning the Kickstarter and basically learning how to be an independent board games publisher, we benefited an enormous amount from the Stegmaier blogs that Jamey was writing about how to run Kickstarter campaigns, how to build a supply chain, contacts, connections. Some of the people you've mentioned in your blog posts we ended up going on to work with directly. So the Pandemonium Institute has Blood on the Clocktower out now. It's been out since May in Australia last year, kind of June, July around the rest of the world. And it's going well, but we're at that kind of growing pains point of the business where it's like, all right, what do we do next? How do we establish ourselves? How do we build the business we want to grow and make the games we want to make without experiencing burnout or just running out of money? And so, yeah, in the spirit of learning more from Jamey and sharing with other people who might want to know a few things or two about how to start and run a board games business, we thought we would have this public chat today, and Jamey was very, very kind to oblige. So thank you very much for that. And question one. So one thing that's happening now is when you're self-publishing, one thing we're finding challenging is we're starting off with a hot question, with a real banger. Managing your own stock levels. It's all well and good to run a big Kickstarter campaign and take a bunch of pre-orders and then delay that Kickstarter for just years and years. just not deliver at all. That's the easiest thing in the world. But then you finally deliver, and then it's another thing entirely to transition from this huge one-shot outpouring of games into being a business that prints its existing game, just one game for us so far, freighting them, storing them, selling them in an ongoing way, and in a way that isn't based on a huge influx of orders that comes with a Kickstarter. So, in your own experience, when managing your own stock, where do you sort of I'd like to hear you talk a bit about where you like to just keep your stock levels at for backup games. Like, do you try and align the next print run to arrive just as your current stock runs out, or do you like to keep a backlog of about 6 months or so? Leave a healthier buffer. What are your thoughts about that? And then I can ask some follow-up questions.
Yeah, this topic is very much on my mind today because I just got an email about an hour ago from our director of logistics saying that Wingspan Asia, a product that we released around 3 months ago now, or we started talking about it 3 months ago, we have 18 copies left in the US now on our web store, which came as a bit of a surprise. We thought we had 1,000 left, and our fulfillment center counted wrong, and now we have a lot less than we thought. And so dealing with stock level problems in real time. And like you said, I very much prefer to have a buffer. I prefer to have that in stock, especially on our web store at all times, but also to supply retailers and distributors on an ongoing basis. We usually print quarterly to make sure that we keep up with that demand, but every time we print, we're just estimating for what that future demand will be. And that's tough to do sometimes. You have a big reviewer come out with a review about your game, or a major article come out, and suddenly demand jumps way higher than you expected. So having that buffer in place is really key. But at the same time, for us, I don't want to order so many copies that we're just sitting on 1,000 copies, tens of thousands of copies of a game that we're not selling. So it's a constant puzzle to figure that out.
It is okay. That is reassuring to hear, because I'm I think we're 5 or 6 years into working on Blood on the Clocktower, and sometimes there are still things that are happening that happen to us for the first time, and they make you go oh man, I don't know how to do board games at all. So it is comforting to hear that this is not a solved problem, that it is just all right. You've got to kind of engage in the black magic, the black science of figuring out sales rates, what will happen. And I hear you about that thing when a review might drop or something. We'll be watching our sales and they'll triple for a day, and then we're on the internet going like, "What happened? Like, who talked about Blood on the Clocktower in a positive way?"
And just to ask about this, because this I think impacts it a lot. Are you in retail and distribution now, or are you just primarily selling directly?
We're selling directly through our website, but we have entered into Asmodee North America and UK and Nordics have bought a limited amount, and in Australia we are distributing through our fulfillment partner Etherworks. So we're also selling direct to retailers. Again, yesterday I was working with our logistics and fulfillment officer Reggie, looking at the Stegmaier retail page, going, "What can we borrow from this? This seems like an effective way of doing things." And so we are selling direct to retailers, but also just establishing ourselves that way. So a couple of distributors have taken a punt, have kind of gone, all right, let's order a small amount and see how it goes. So yeah, we're kind of trying to do everything right now.
I asked that partially because I found that it really helps once you start to get those relationships going with distributors in particular. Retailers are great kind of on an ongoing basis, but distributors, if they start to trust you and know that they can sell your product, we often go to them before we even start a print run and say, hey, like, we're looking to make more games, or we're getting to that point where we're looking to do a reprint. How many do you want? And having even just an informal, not a solid commitment, but just an informal estimate from distributors can really, really help. So hopefully you'll get there. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, there was Asmodee were good enough to kind of they got in on the second print run of the game. So just to get into the weeds for all you hopefully Clocktower fans out there, or Stegmaier fans watching the stream, the first print run we only ordered about 1,000 extra copies because it was really at the height of the shipping, the freighting costs for COVID. So we didn't want to put more games on boats when it was possible that the prices would lower in future. So we basically ran out of stock of the first delivery within about a month. And so the second print run came out, delivered just before Christmas. It was really tight there. I think a few people in Europe admittedly didn't get their copies before Christmas, which really sucked. That didn't feel good. But there were issues with German customs. And yeah, now we're on to print run number 3 and just kind of figuring out, do we just order a big batch and kind of go, all right, let's not think about manufacturing for a bit, or do we just do it piecemeal at a time and not try and get too far ahead of ourselves?
Yeah, it's an ongoing guessing game, but I found that the more information I can get from distributors and retailers, the more helpful it is. I've played Blood on the Clocktower both online and in person once. My friend Carly brought a copy to a little event that I had, and it's a pretty big game. So I'm guessing maybe you can fit 4 copies per carton, maybe 6. Have you thought of, like, how is that going given freight shipping?
I will show you what we do.
3. Oh no.
I thought you were going to say 4 copies per pallet. I'm like,
roughly. So this is one of the best pieces of upselling that Panda GM has probably ever perpetrated. The game comes with this book-like box. It's
a
half
big
empty
box
right now, which is why I can carry it. But it's got these nice little book-like corners, and these aren't necessary for gameplay at all. But the box is used in gameplay, and we really, really love these corners and have made a lot of sacrifices in order to include them. And one of those is that the game is pre-packed at the factory by Panda in boxes exactly like this. We have these nice foam cut corners that protect the box. So it saves on fulfillment costs by just pre-packing the whole thing at Panda, but it means there's only about 3 to a carton. On a single pallet, we get 24 copies. But the pallets are short enough to double stack, so we generally freight it unpalletized. So we just get a whole container and chuck it all in there. So when we order a print run, it's usually in multiples of how much can you fit into a container. Thrilling stuff for all you Clocktower fans out there. How big is the box and how much does it weigh is absolutely critical to this stuff. Yeah.
Have you been tempted? So during the pandemic, I've thought a lot more about box sizes. Have you been tempted to make the box smaller, even though this is the box that you love? Have you been tempted by that just so you can fit more on a pallet?
I'm going to throw that one over to Steven. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, Steven.
It's a design decision,
I was listening to that question. I hope Evin answers this one. I made the box literally as small as it could be to fit everything in.
Mm.
So yes, I want to make the box smaller, but that will need to come with some less pieces or some other sacrifices. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind sort of changing the tack of the conversation just a little bit. There's something that I'm just busting to ask you, Jamey, that I don't want to run out of time, so I want to get in early.
Okay.
My journey over the last couple of years has been from hobbyist amateur game designer to professional game designer to sort of business owner, project manager. And the process has been, I found things in that process that I've loved that I never thought that I would love, and some things that were just a massive pain. I don't know if your journey is similar or if it went in the opposite direction, but what is it that you love the most about what you do? And if extra points, if it's something that's like super nerdy or something that we wouldn't expect, like when you go to sleep at night and you look at what you've created and you get that feeling of just love for what you do, what sort of jumps out at you as the highlight?
That's a great question, and I can relate entirely to what you just said about your journey, because I started out too just designing a game. I designed viticulture, and I was excited about Kickstarter. I was excited about running a Kickstarter, those two things, and I found along the way that I really do enjoy a lot of the aspects of running a business, and I very much still enjoy game design. I'll mention two surprises maybe, because one surprise was I found that I really enjoyed, more than I thought, I enjoyed developing games designed by other designers. Like working with Elizabeth Hargrave on Wingspan, for me as the developer, her as the designer, that was one of the great joys of my life, to throw around ideas with her, for me to play test something and say this worked, this didn't work, and not have it be my game, to have it be someone else's game, and to bring her vision to life in a way that I thought would bring joy to Stegmaier Games fans and followers. That was a big surprise for me, and I really loved that. The other surprise was that I did not realize that content creation would be such a big part of my job, and that I would enjoy it as much as I do, like making videos about other people's games and what I like about them, and making all the blog posts that I make. I write pretty big blog posts twice a week, and I really enjoy it. I've done that for
novel length.
Yeah.
You've got a back catalog that is you've written 2 or more books. Yeah.
Right. And I enjoy it. I love it. It's not a chore for me to do that. I genuinely love it. So it's been kind of surprising to me when I look at like a week of my life every week. A lot more of it is content creation than I ever thought, and a lot more of it is game development than I ever thought. Have you found the same thing, that there are certain things that you've discovered that you didn't anticipate that you really love, and certain things? I didn't mention the stuff that I want to cut, and there's stuff that I have cut in the past, like accounting. I don't like accounting. I have other people do. I pay other people to do accounting now. So I've kind of trimmed out those things that I don't enjoy or that I'm not good at, and leaned into the things that I do enjoy.
Yeah. Well, that sounds smart. I completely forgot your question. It was halfway through that.
Are there things like that for you, that surprises that you have found that are a part of your job and that you really, really enjoy, that you didn't anticipate at all when you got into game design?
Spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets.
That's still my answer. That is, as a recreational spreadsheet user, this has been a dream come true. When you get a really good spreadsheet going, you're like, that works. Yeah. I'm proud of myself. Yeah. That was a joke. Yeah, Evin has tempted me with the forbidden fruit of spreadsheets, but similar to what you just said, I find that I'm really crap at just bring the mic closer.
Sort of core mechanics and coming up with really original ideas, but I'm really good at taking someone else's idea that isn't fully developed and adding this and adding that, and then sort of making it my own, and working with other people's ideas to fully flesh them out. I found that much more rewarding. Like I'm constantly finding games from people that I know that haven't had either the time or the inclination to take it all the way to market. So it's like there's a really good idea there, but it's pretty rough. It's a first draft, and I sort of latch onto that and say, "Oh, let me add it." So that's been and it's just sort of, it's cool to promote others' successes and others' accomplishments as well. So
Yeah.
All right, that's my question. I'm out of the way. You can get back to stock questions.
Well, no, this does segue pretty well into what I wanted to talk about. The inevitable wingspan question, which like wingspan is, I'm not saying we're going to run out and produce the next wingspan. It does have that lightning in a bottle feel to it that's impossible to deliberately reproduce, which is just brilliant to see. But with future games that the Pandemonium Institute is looking to publish, Stephen has a bunch that he designed prior to Blood on the Clocktower. I think Blood on the Clocktower is your 8th game, Stephen. So we'll probably do a few of those, but we are in a position where we can publish other people's designs. We have games that we've seen and liked, or friends with really strong ideas. And you do have the most famous recent example, probably in the last decade, of a established publisher picking up someone else's design and just swinging for the fences and hitting that. So we've looked over all the submission criteria in your website and your idea for games, and you have a very strong philosophy about what you will accept and what you enjoy in games. And that's all fantastic advice. But in terms of just the interpersonal relationship, or the number one piece of advice, if you could only give one, about being a publisher or developer working with someone else's game, what's a really great starting point? What's your number one?
The number one. Well, let me stumble into this answer. I'll say something, and maybe I'll think of something better along the way. But you mentioned those restrictions on our website, and those constraints. And Stephen, I'm sure you've encountered this in game design too. Constraints can be really helpful and empowering to figure out what can make something great in a game. And I found the same thing with our submission guidelines, that instead of we have probably missed out on some great games by saying that we don't accept games that only play up to 3 players. There are some wonderful 2-player games out there that I love that we could have accepted. Maybe we could have done a good job with them, but we kind of picked our sweet spot over the years of medium weight Euro games that play from 1 to 5 players. And those are the games that I gravitate towards. Those are the games that I really enjoy working on. And by narrowing that, by having that constraint, we've also limited the games that can be submitted to us. And that's been really helpful too, because otherwise we might have way too many games to even look at on our submission form than we're able to reasonably consider. So I probably could come up with a better answer if I could think about it for a little while, but constraints are the answer that come to mind at first. Have you thought about that for you? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, no, we can sit here in silence for 10 minutes while you think it's fine. I gave the thumbs up before, because I find constraints really, really useful in the artistic and the design process as well. Yeah. If you can do anything that you want, you don't know where to start. But as soon as you've got constraints, you can design around them, and they're initially interpreted as a restriction, but they are actually a structure upon which you build. It's like in theater sports, or I don't know if it's called theater sports in US and Canada, improvised theater.
Yeah.
If you can create any scene at all, you're like, I don't know. But as soon as you get that lead line, or it's like, this is your lead question, you've got something to go on. So I find that really good.
Just to give one example from Blood on the Clocktower, in the spirit of discussion, one thing during the development process, I think my sound is down for this, so I'm just going to hold this close. Yep, that looks reasonably unreasonably loud now. Great. One thing that we kept coming up against was the character limit, or the word limit for Blood on the Clocktower characters. And Stephen stuck to a principle of, it's got to be able to fit on a token and be about 1 sentence, and that is about 140 characters, including spaces. And so many good ideas, or so many strong characters, have kind of had to be simplified down or modified or just not accepted, because sticking to that limit has the principle of, people should be able to understand a character's ability in 1 sentence. If you need more words than that to describe it, it's going to be too complicated and not intuitive to play. So restrictions, absolutely love it, all on board with it.
And the little twist too that I'd add is that it's okay to also give yourself permission to I think break outside those restrictions. Like, I think I talk to a lot of people who want to start a blog, or they want to start a YouTube channel, and I suggest that they just start to create something. They make that first video, they make that second video, because I think sometimes people go into it thinking, they need to plan out exactly what that content is going to be, or what their blog is going to be about. And they find after a few posts that they find that they're more excited to write something else, but they don't feel like they're allowed to do that because they put their own constraint on themselves. So having those constraints, but giving myself permission to say, oh, I'm more excited about this thing today, I want to work on that today instead, that can be really freeing for me.
Excellent. I'm coming in hot with another boring question.
Okay.
It's
thanks for tuning in, everyone.
It's not boring.
Thought we were going to play Blood on the Clocktower today. Instead, we're talking about one thing that we're finding challenging is the legal situation of running a board games business. So this is going to be a pretty broad question, but basically we want to stay compliant everywhere. We want to make sure our trademarks and Steven's intellectual property are protected everywhere they can be. So what's the most challenging thing you've found from the legal sense of compliance and protection about operating in a global marketplace? And I'm waiting for you to just give an answer that is something that we've never considered, and I will have to frantically be on the email to our lawyer after this meeting. So that would be the best answer you could give. Just one that absolutely terrifies me.
I don't know if I have an absolutely terrifying answer. I mean, the main things that come to mind are that we do extensive trademark searching, and then we apply for those trademarks, which is, I think, fairly standard. I think something that I've realized more recently is prioritizing where we apply for those trademarks, because originally we would only apply for them in the US, and now we're doing that in other countries too, and the process is a little different in every country. And there's also CE testing. I don't even know what CE stands for, but it's the testing that we do in China. Panda handles it for us, and they send us a document saying that's been CE tested, and that seems to be helpful for places that care about that type of testing.
It's that little logo that you've seen on everything your whole life, and you're just like, well, I don't know what that means. Yeah. It's
and I think most people who use that logo don't actually get the testing. They just put the logo on there and hope that they're never asked about it.
It's like an ancient glyph that people just have to use to make your product work, and in 1,000 years no one will know what it means, but it's like, it doesn't have the CE logo, like, no good, won't sell, can't do it. In terms of that, so is there have there been like, in terms of the kind of public legal policies that you have, do you typically find that you have an inciting incident behind those, where it's like, oh, this thing happened, so now we need this? Or is it more, hey, we thought about this, and this is kind of a good preventative thing to do? And is this, generally, how do you operate? How do you tend to operate in that regard? Like, what's your kind of awareness level of needing a policy or not?
I'm smiling because the correct answer, I think, is that we would anticipate every problem in advance and prevent it with proper policies and whatnot. But a lot of it is reactionary, unfortunately. Like, we had a counterfeiting problem with Wingspan a few years ago, and it inspired us to start using like Amazon transparency, because we saw a lot of copies show up on Amazon. And some of it we just can't prevent. Like, I'm sure there are copies being sold in certain places that we don't even know about that are counterfeit. And then there's what was the other thing that came to mind? With Wingspan, again, also, there are a lot of people that make fan-made cards for Wingspan, because and I love to see that. I love to see fans creating stuff inspired by our games. But there's also a fine line between someone making something for fun and sharing it, and someone starting to print that thing in a way that looks like it belongs in the game, or maybe pass it off as something that belongs in the game, or they're selling it and they're making money off of it. And where do you draw that line? Have you guys thought about that a little bit? Because it'd probably be pretty easy for someone to create a character for Blood on the Clocktower. Where do you draw that line between, hey, that's an awesome fan thing, versus, hey, you're selling an expansion for our game at this point?
Yeah, honestly, we're still figuring that out. I think that's something. Everything you've said absolutely resonates with us, and I think it does with Steven as well. Clocktower is the framework it provides allows people a lot of opportunity to homebrew a character. And we want to encourage that creativity. We want people to enjoy our game however they wish. But yeah, there is that line where people are kind of might be representing something as being part of the game. One of the things that concerned us a lot early on, before we had as much notoriety as we would have liked, is, and particularly during COVID when people couldn't play in person, so people would hear about Blood on the Clocktower, and it kind of gained a lot of traction during COVID because it was a large social game that gave people a way to interact in groups consistently and in a semi-addictive way if you enjoyed the game. That kind of got a lot of people through COVID, as we understood. Yeah. But a lot of people discovered it because of that and would be invited into someone's game with homebrew characters. And it's fine if you are a big fan of the game and you've made these homebrew characters, but we were really concerned about people's first experience of Blood on the Clocktower being this game with homebrew characters that maybe don't work so well, and they don't know that they're in this homebrew situation. They think they've just played Blood on the Clocktower. So it is something that is on our mind a lot, thinking about where do you draw the line between that's awesome, that's a cool homebrew, and incorporating the large part of the community of players who enjoy that and want to play it, whilst also thinking chiefly about the experience of the first time player. The new player is something we are always thinking about. How do you onboard the new player? How do you make it simple for them? How do you make their experience the best thing possible? Because we were all new players at some point. And everyone who will eventually become a huge fan of Blood on the Clocktower will be a new player at some point. So their experience is just as important, and we need to find the balance between it.
I love that. That's fascinating to think about that. I often think about the onboarding process, but I haven't thought about that. Some people probably play our games with house rules for the first time and don't even realize that they're house rules. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I've just started playing D&D without house rules after 30 years. It's a really good game. But the other way is I will never play BattleTech without house rules. Like house rules are compulsory, so it goes ways.
Stephen, do you want to? I think we are nearing the end of our time with Jamey. Do you want to hit up one more question?
If we have one more, I'd like to sort of come in at the end with my doozy question, if that's all right. But
this is the big gotcha we've been waiting for. No, we've been streaming nearly half an hour now. This is the time.
Yeah. I was trying to think of a way to make this question a little more intimidating, but it's actually a friendly question.
Okay.
Something that I've noticed in when someone gets repeatedly interviewed, either by video or usually the same questions come up, and the same questions come up and the same questions get answered. What is the one question that you wish people would ask you because you would really like to just talk about X, whatever X happens to be, but you just never get asked?
That's a great question. I've actually been asked that question before.
Oh, really?
But I've forgotten my answer for it. I don't know what it was. Yeah, but it's a great question to ask. You're right. Yeah, I do get asked a lot of the same questions a lot, but I also enjoy answering them a lot. That's why I do a weekly live stream, and I don't mind it. That's a good question, but it changes all the time. Like what things do I want to talk about? Really, I love to talk about games. I love to talk about game design. And it's one of my favorite things, just to sit around and talk about a game that I happen to find out that the other person loves just as much as I do. So it's tough to stumble into that, but when it happens, it feels really, really good. Like you just mentioned BattleTech. If I happen to love BattleTech, I haven't played it in years, but if I happen to love it, this would be a magical moment right now where we could talk about that for a few minutes. That isn't the case for that specific game for me because I haven't played it since I was like 13. It's been a long time, and I'm sure we didn't play it right. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Stephen, what's your favorite BattleTech house rule, if you want to share it? What's the house rule for BattleTech that is necessary for maximum enjoyment?
Oh, you don't. That is a path you do not want to go down. This will be an hour. This will be an hour and a half interview. I suppose to answer that question, anything that takes away the realism and adds speed and fun. So nothing in particular comes to mind. But there's a lot of stuff in there that's really clunky that is there because it's real. I think because it's realistic, and I just want to get in the pew pew.
Steven, someone's asking what class you play. They say they're kidding. Gambling is asking what class do you play. I think for
Class
BattleTech?
for D&D or for
I think
BattleTech?
BattleTech. Are there classes in BattleTech? This is
MechWarrior, I believe, has classes. I haven't played MechWarrior for years though. Like we do a homebrew system. A friend of mine has modded BattleTech meshed with professional wrestling. It's fantastic. So for D&D you can't get past the wizard thief.
I am going to answer another question from chat. Screw Loose has asked, has Jamey played Blood on the Clocktower? And I will give the following details. It was an online game of Bad Moon Rising where Jamey was an outsider, the goon. The game lasted for 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
And he lost, and he says he still had a good time, which is probably the highest compliment I think we can receive. Is just not talking about the first player experience. You released a video. I think sometime in the I don't remember when, but we rewatched it again recently in preparation for this, which is why I know so much. We were like, oh wow, Jamey likes Clocktower. But talking about that new player experience, the ideal first player experience for Blood on the Clocktower is in person, trouble brewing, 8 to 10 players, usually 9 players is the sweet spot. And then you come and play it online, 2 hours, Goon, Bad Moon Rising, Lost, and you still love the game. We're like, lucky. Okay, yeah.
What?
We have. Sorry, go on, Jamey. Go for it.
I was just gonna say nice things about your game, but it was surprising to me because it is not the style of game that I usually play. I'm an introvert, so I often stay away from this style of game. And it was on Discord at the time. I mentioned to you that I have since played in person, and that worked well too. But the thing that I thought that was really magical is the game almost encourages you to talk one-on-one with people at times and not just have to stand up in front of a group and declare things. And that, for me as an introvert, made it a really welcoming large group game. So I really appreciate that was built into the core principles of the game.
I had a similar experience with Scythe. Actually, it's not the type of game that I would usually play, but it did everything really well, and I came away with a similar experience, just loving every little thing, even though it was very much out of my genre. So,
well, thanks for trying it.
Scythe and Blood on the Clocktower are both games I would typically enjoy. just coming in with that one.
So we've hit the half an hour mark, and in to sort of respect your time, Jamey, I want to thank you for attending this today and your sharing your knowledge and your sincerity too. I think that comes across with everything you say. Evin has benefited enormously from your blogs and your willingness, literally to be transparent about the process, not just of making a game, but developing a game, running a publishing company. So thank you very much for your time today. Thank you, Evin, and that was Jamey Stegmaier. And I have no idea how to close an interview.
Well, I'll just say thank you as well. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Evan. I really appreciate that. And I hope some of my blog posts have helped you avoid the many mistakes that I've made. That's my goal for writing those posts.
And we'll hopefully continue to do so. Yes, I just want to repeat, Stephen. Thank you very much. Sorry, Stephen, you had something else to add?
I was just going to say, if you're watching this on YouTube, down below we will have appropriate links to Jamey's games and blog posts and other relevant URLs. So.
Cool. All right, thank you very much, everyone watching today. Thank you, Jamey. Thank you, Stephen. And we'll see you next time. So long.